The briefing room at Nellie's Air Force Base fell silent the moment the door opened. November sun sliced through the Venetian blinds, casting bars of light across worn linoleum that had seen 3 generations of fighter pilots. Captain Rory Kincaid stepped inside wearing civilian clothes, faded jeans, a leather jacket older than most of the men in the room, boots that had walked through more combat zones than training grounds. She carried no insignia, no rank, nothing to announce what she was. The newest class of F-16 candidates looked up from their tablets with the casual dismissal reserved for administrative staff or lost civilians. One of them, a broad-shouldered cadet with a Tennessee drawl whose name tape read Morrison, didn't even glance up. He was mid-sentence, telling another joke about female pilots to his seatmate, something crude about G-forces and anatomical limitations. Rory moved to the front of the room without acknowledgement, setting down a weathered flight bag that bore scorch marks along one edge. The zipper was broken. Inside, visible to anyone paying attention, was a helmet with 23 small red stars painted beneath the visor rim. Morrison finally noticed her, his eyes tracking up from the civilian boots to the absence of uniform. His face registered confusion, then something worse, assumption. He stood, blocking her path to the podium with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. "Ma'am, I think you're in the wrong building," he said, voice loud enough to carry. Several cadets snickered. "Admin offices are in Building 6. This is a restricted briefing." Rory stopped. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him with eyes the color of winter Atlantic water, the kind of gray that held depth and cold and things that didn't surface easily. Morrison's smile faltered but held. He was 22, fresh from undergraduate pilot training with scores high enough to earn him a fighter track assignment before he'd ever seen real sky. He reached out, his hand moving toward her shoulder, not aggressive, but dismissive, the gesture of someone accustomed to moving obstacles that didn't belong. "Let me help you." His fingers never made contact. Rory's hand came up in a motion so economical it barely registered as movement, redirecting his reach with a pressure point grip that made his entire arm go rigid. She held it there for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for him to understand the differential in training, then released. Morrison stepped back, confusion turning to irritation. The room had gone completely quiet now, the kind of silence that precedes revelation or violence. Behind Rory, the door opened again. Colonel Vance entered, and every cadet in the room shot to attention with the synchronized precision of training. Morrison's face went white. Vance didn't look at the cadets. He looked at Rory, then at Morrison's still extended hand, and his jaw tightened. "Captain Kincaid," Vance said, voice clipped, "my apologies for the delay." The word captain landed like ordnance. Morrison's eyes went to the flight bag, to the helmet inside with its 23 stars, each one representing an enemy aircraft destroyed in combat. Not practice, not simulation, combat. His face cycled through several shades of realization before settling on something close to horror. Rory still hadn't spoken. She picked up her bag, walked past Morrison like he was furniture, and set the helmet on the podium where everyone could see it. The morning light caught the stars, each one hand-painted, each one representing a story that had never been declassified. She finally turned to face the room, her expression neutral but her presence suddenly massive in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. "Sit down, Cadet Morrison," she said quietly. Her voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "You're about to learn why you don't make assumptions about people based on what they're wearing." Morrison sat. The room remained frozen. Vance moved to the side wall, arms crossed, watching with the expression of a man who had seen this play out before and knew exactly how it would end. Rory pulled a remote from her jacket pocket and clicked it. The screen behind her illuminated with footage from helmet camera night vision green, the distinctive outline of hostile aircraft, tracers cutting through darkness like angry fireflies. The timestamp read 6 years prior. Syria. Operation Inherent Resolve. Coordinates that were still classified. "My call sign is Reaper," Rory began, her tone conversational, almost gentle. Some of you have probably heard the name. Most of you think it's myth, unit legend, the kind of story that gets exaggerated in ready rooms after too many drinks. She clicked again. The screen showed a MiG-29 breaking apart in midair, the kill confirmed by satellite imagery and ground observation. I earned that call sign on my 14th combat deployment. I was 29 years old. I'd already put more flight hours in hostile airspace than everyone in this room combined will accumulate in their entire careers, if they're lucky. The video continued playing behind her, a montage of engagements, each one surgical, each one ending with enemy aircraft tumbling from the sky in various states of destruction. The cadets watched, their earlier swagger evaporating like moisture in desert heat. Morrison's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone bloodless. Rory let the footage run for 30 seconds longer, then paused it on an image of her aircraft returning to base. The F-16's underside scorched, holes visible in the left wing, fuel streaming behind in a visible trail. That was my 19th kill, she continued. I landed that bird with 14 minutes of fuel remaining, hydraulic failure, and a jamming malfunction that meant I'd been flying without radar warning for the last 40 minutes of combat. The crew chief cried when he saw the damage, said it was a miracle I made it back. She clicked off the screen. I told him miracles are what you call skill when you don't want to acknowledge competence. The silence had texture now, heavy and uncomfortable. Rory walked along the front row of seats, her boots making no sound on the linoleum. She stopped in front of Morrison. Up close, she was smaller than him by 5 inches, maybe 100 pounds lighter. None of that mattered. The presence she projected made him shrink in his chair. "You were about to touch me, Cadet," she said softly. "Without permission, without knowing who I was or what I'm capable of. That tells me something about your decision-making process. It tells me you make assumptions based on incomplete information. In combat, that will get you killed. Worse, it will get your wingman killed." She turned to address the full room. Every person in this class has passed the same physical tests, the same aptitude screenings, the same psychological evaluations. The Air Force doesn't send incompetent people to fighter training, but it does send people who carry biases they're not aware of. Those biases are what I'm here to break. Colonel Vance pushed off from the wall, his voice cutting through. Captain Kincaid holds the record for air-to-air kills by any American pilot in the 21st century. She's been shot down twice, evaded capture both times, and returned to active combat status within 6 weeks of recovery. She's here because I requested her specifically. Because this class has a problem with retention of qualified pilots who don't fit your preconceived notions of what a fighter pilot looks like. Rory pulled a roster from her bag, unfolding it across the podium. 20 names, 8 of them women. She tapped the list. Half of you will wash out before you ever sit in a cockpit. Another quarter will make it through training but never see combat deployment. Of the remaining few who become operational fighter pilots, statistically, maybe 1 or 2 will ever fire weapons in anger. I'm not here to make you feel good about yourselves. I'm here to ensure that, when you do face that moment, you're not carrying any bullshit that will compromise your effectiveness or the safety of your squadron. She gestured to Morrison. "Stand up." He did, reluctantly. Rory walked a circle around him, appraising like a drill instructor examining a recruit. "You've got excellent scores, Cadet Morrison, top 5% in your class. Your flight instructors say you have natural instincts, good hands, tactical awareness beyond your experience level. All of that is true. You could be an exceptional pilot." She stopped in front of him again. "But you just tried to physically remove me from a restricted briefing because I wasn't wearing a uniform. What does that tell me about your threat assessment capabilities?" Morrison's jaw worked, but no words came out. Rory didn't wait for an answer. "It tells me you rely on visual shortcuts instead of environmental awareness. You saw civilian clothes and made a determination about authority and belonging without checking your surroundings, without knotting the flight bag with combat damage, without questioning why Colonel Vance might have entered immediately after me. In air combat, that laziness will manifest as target fixation. You'll be so focused on the bandit, you can see that you'll miss the one lining up on your 6 o'clock. She moved back to the podium, her hands resting on either side of the helmet. The 23 stars gleamed under fluorescent light. This helmet has seen 3 different aircraft. The first F-16 I flew was retired after accumulating too much combat stress damage. The second was shot down over hostile territory in Iraqi, ejected at 400 feet, and walked 16 miles through enemy-controlled desert to reach friendly lines. The third aircraft I flew until my last combat deployment 8 months ago, when I was reassigned to training command. Rory picked up the helmet, turning it so the cadets could see the other side. There, beneath the star count, was a small inscription in careful lettering. For those who didn't make it home. 11 names, each one a pilot lost in combat, each one someone Rory had flown with, trained with, drank with in ready rooms across 3 continents. The mood in the briefing room shifted again, the earlier embarrassment giving way to something more somber, more real. Every name on this helmet represents a failure of the system that's supposed to keep us alive, Rory said quietly. Some died because of mechanical failure, some because of bad intelligence. One died because his wingman froze during combat and failed to call out a threat. That wingman carried that guilt for 2 years before he took his own life in a base housing unit in Arizona. His name isn't on my helmet, but it should be. Because the system failed to prepare him for the psychological reality of combat, failed to give him the tools to process what he'd experienced, failed to recognize the signs before it was too late. She set the helmet down gently. The room felt smaller now, the morning sun less bright. Morrison was still standing, but his posture had changed, shoulders slightly hunched, the earlier cockiness completely absent. Rory looked at each cadet in turn, her gaze methodical and assessing. "I don't care what you think about women in combat aviation," she said. "I don't care about your personal beliefs regarding gender and capability. What I care about is whether you can function as part of a team when your life depends on trusting the person flying next to you, regardless of what they look like or where they came from. Because in combat, there is no margin for prejudice. There's only competence and incompetence, survival and death." Colonel Vance stepped forward. "Captain Kincaid will be conducting your tactical training for the next 8 weeks. She has full authority to remove anyone from this program who demonstrates inability to adapt or learn. Her standards are higher than anything you've experienced because the reality of combat aviation is higher than anything you can imagine. If you have a problem with taking orders from her, the door is behind you. Use it now and save us all the time." Nobody moved. Morrison slowly sat down, his eyes fixed on the helmet, on those 23 stars that represented a level of combat experience that existed mostly in classified after-action reports and unit legends. Rory pulled out a tablet, swiping through files. "We'll start with basic assumptions. How many of you believe that physical strength is a primary factor in fighter-pilot effectiveness?" Several hands went up, hesitant. Rory nodded. "Wrong. Physical strength matters in certain scenarios, pulling Gs during high-speed maneuvers, for instance, but upper body strength is largely irrelevant in modern fighter aircraft. What matters is cardiovascular endurance, G tolerance, spatial awareness, decision-making under extreme stress, and the ability to process multiple information streams simultaneously while performing complex motor tasks. Studies have shown that women and men perform essentially equally in all these areas when properly trained. The difference isn't capability, it's culture." She clicked to a new slide showing physiological data from various pilot studies. Women actually have some advantages in certain areas: better multitasking capabilities, faster recovery from G-induced loss of consciousness, lower overall oxygen consumption, which means longer endurance in emergency situations. But we don't talk about these advantages because they don't fit the narrative that fighter pilots have constructed about themselves over 70 years of male-dominated aviation culture. A cadet in the back row, a woman with sharp features and a name tape reading Kowalski, raised her hand. Rory nodded to her. Ma'am, how do you handle the social dynamics? In combat squadrons, I mean, the resistance. Rory smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I ignore it. My job is to fly missions and complete objectives. If someone has a problem with my presence, that's their problem, not mine. I don't waste energy trying to prove myself to people who have already decided I don't belong. I let my performance speak. After my 7th kill, most of the resistance disappeared. After the 14th, I was offered a position as flight lead. By the 20th, I was training new pilots regardless of their personal opinions about me. She paused, her expression softening slightly. But I won't lie to you, Cadet Kowalski. It's exhausting. Every day you have to be better than good, you have to be perfect. Because any mistake you make will be attributed to your gender, not to normal human error. When a male pilot crashes during training, it's an accident. When a female pilot crashes, it's proof that women can't handle fighters. That double standard exists, and it won't change just because we want it to. What changes it is a decade of flawless performance from enough women that the statistical narrative becomes undeniable. Morrison finally found his voice. Captain, I owe you an apology. What I did was... Rory cut him off with a raised hand. I don't want your apology, Cadet Morrison. I want you to learn from this moment. I want you to carry it with you every time you make an assumption about someone's capability based on appearance. I want you to remember that the person you just dismissed might be the one who saves your life in combat. I want you to be better than you were 5 minutes ago. That's all. The next 6 hours were brutal. Rory ran them through tactical scenarios that had no easy answers, simulations based on real combat encounters, where the correct decision was never obvious until after the fact. She dissected their choices with surgical precision, showing them how cognitive biases, confirmation bias, availability heuristic, anchoring led to fatal errors in high-stress environments. She made them watch helmet camera footage from pilots who had died, freezing the video at decision points, asking them what they would have done differently. By noon, several cadets looked physically ill. Morrison had stopped making eye contact with anyone. During the lunch break, Rory stood alone in the briefing room studying the roster. Colonel Vance entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. You were harder on them than I expected. They need harder, Rory replied. Morrison isn't a bad kid. He's just a product of a system that's never challenged his assumptions. Give him 6 months under my training, he'll be solid. It's the ones who stay quiet that worry me. The ones who smile and nod and then carry the same biases into combat where they become lethal. Vance sipped his coffee. The Air Force is changing, Rory, slowly, but it's changing. Your generation is proving that. My generation is dying to prove it, Rory corrected. 3 of those names on my helmet are women. 2 were killed in action. 1 died in a training accident that the investigation ruled pilot error, even though the aircraft had a documented mechanical issue that should have grounded it. We're not just fighting enemy aircraft. We're fighting a bureaucracy that would rather maintain comfortable lies than confront uncomfortable truths. Vance didn't argue. He'd seen too much to pretend otherwise. What do you think of this class? Rory glanced at the roster again. Kowalski will be top of class if she survives the social pressure. There's another one, Garcia, quiet but sharp. He asks the right questions. Morrison will either become exceptional or wash out completely, depends on whether his ego can handle being wrong for the next 8 weeks. The rest are average. Good enough to complete training, but I wouldn't want them on my wing in a real fight. That's why you're here, Vance said, to raise the average. The afternoon session focused on air combat maneuvering, theoretical at this stage, since none of the cadets had enough flight time to attempt the maneuvers in actual aircraft. Rory projected a 3-dimensional tactical display, showing aircraft positions during a dogfight over northern Iraq. Her aircraft trooper was outnumbered 3-1. All bandits experienced pilots flying superior aircraft. The cadets watched as the engagement unfolded in real-time recording. Rory's calm voice on the radio communication providing counterpoint to the violent maneuvering visible in the tactical display. Reaper extending vertical, bandits pursuing. Negative radar lock switching to heat. Fox 2, Fox 2, the missile tone sounded, followed by the distinctive explosion signature. One bandit disappeared from the display. The remaining two split, trying to bracket her. Rory's aircraft went into a high-G barrel roll that would have blacked out most pilots, threading between the two hostiles and emerging behind the eastern bandit with firing solution. Guns only this time, the distinctive sound of the 20mm cannon cutting through radio static. Another bandit down. The final hostile broke off, running for Syrian airspace at maximum speed. Rory didn't pursue. She turned for friendly territory, her fuel state critical, her aircraft damaged from near-miss shrapnel. The footage ended. Rory froze it on the final frame, her F-16 limping home, trailing fuel, the Mediterranean sunset behind her. Questions. Garcia raised his hand. "Ma'am, why didn't you pursue the third bandit? You had tactical advantage." "Fuel state," Rory answered. "I'd already spent more than anticipated in the engagement. Pursuing into Syrian airspace would have meant either getting shot down by surface-to-air missiles or running out of fuel over hostile territory. Neither outcome accomplishes the mission. Sometimes the right decision is knowing when to let the enemy run." Another cadet, Jenkins, spoke up. "The tactical display showed you pulled 9.3 GS during that barrel roll. How did you stay conscious?" Rory smiled slightly. "Training, genetics, and stubbornness. I've spent thousands of hours in the centrifuge building G-tolerance. My resting heart rate is 42 beats per minute, and I'd rather black out trying than die because I was afraid to push my limits." She looked at the female cadet specifically. "The myth that women can't handle G-forces is exactly that, a myth. Proper technique and conditioning matter far more than gender. I've seen male pilots gray out at 6 GS, and female pilots stay sharp at 9. It's individual physiology and training, nothing else." The class ran until 1800 hours. By the end, the cadets looked shell-shocked, their notebooks filled with tactical data and harsh lessons about their own limitations. Rory dismissed them with a reminder. Tomorrow would be harder. They needed to study the engagement footage she was sending to their tablets, analyze every decision point, come prepared to defend their tactical choices in simulated scenarios. Morrison lingered as the others filed out. Rory was packing her materials, her movements efficient and practiced. He approached hesitantly, like someone approaching a live explosive. "Captain Kincaid." She looked up, expression neutral. "Cadet." "I wanted to say, I know you said you didn't want an apology, but I need to say it anyway. What I did was unprofessional and disrespectful. There's no excuse for it. I let my assumptions override my training, and that's exactly what you were talking about with cognitive bias. I'll do better." Rory studied him for a long moment. Morrison met her gaze this time, didn't flinch. She set down her tablet. "You know what I respect, Cadet Morrison, not perfection. Nobody's perfect. What I respect is the ability to recognize your mistakes and learn from them. You made an error in judgment today, a significant one, but you're here acknowledging it, committing to improvement. That matters." She picked up her helmet, running her thumb across the painted stars. "Every kill on this helmet started with someone underestimating me. Enemy pilots who saw a woman's voice on the radio and assumed I'd be easy prey. They learned otherwise, but they learned too late. You're learning now, while the stakes are still just embarrassment instead of death. Consider yourself fortunate." Morrison nodded. "Can I ask you something, ma'am, off the record?" "There's no off the record in military aviation, Cadet. Everything is recorded, evaluated, and filed. But ask anyway. How do you handle the pressure? Not the flying, the constant need to prove yourself. Doesn't it get exhausting?" Rory was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. "It does. Some days I wake up and wonder why I keep doing this. Why I keep volunteering for the deployments, the combat missions, the training assignments where I know I'll face resistance. Then I remember those 11 names on my helmet. They don't get to wake up anymore. They don't get to choose whether to keep fighting or walk away. I owe it to them to be excellent, to prove that their faith in me, their willingness to fly with me despite the doubts of others, was justified. She met Morrison's eyes again. But I also do it for the Kowalskis and the Garcias of the world, the next generation who shouldn't have to fight as hard as I did to earn respect. Every mission I complete perfectly, every trainee I turn into a competent pilot, every prejudice I demolish with performance. That's one less barrier for the women who come after me. That's worth the exhaustion. Morrison stood straighter. You'll have at least one pilot who gets it, ma'am. I promise you that. I'll hold you to that promise, Cadet. Dismissed. He left and Rory was alone in the briefing room. The sun had set while they talked, Las Vegas lights beginning to glow in the distance beyond the fence line. She sat in the chair Morrison had occupied that morning, looking at the empty room, the scattered tablets and notebooks the cadets had left behind. This was the part of combat aviation nobody talked about: the loneliness of being the first, the constant pressure of representation, the weight of knowing that every action reflected not just on herself, but on every woman who would follow. Her phone buzzed, a text from Colonel Vance, first day assessment. She typed back, Morrison will be fine, Kowalski needs encouragement, Garcia needs challenge, rest are average, same as every class. His response came quickly, and Reaper, how's she holding up? Rory smiled at the screen. Vance was one of the few who understood that the call sign wasn't just a name, it was armor, a way of separating the person from the legend, the woman from the weapon. Reaper's immortal. You know that. That's what worries me, Vance replied. She powered down her phone and sat in the darkness for a while longer, her helmet beside her, the 23 stars catching ambient light from the windows. Tomorrow she would teach these cadets about missile employment tactics. Next week, defensive maneuvering. In a month, they'd begin actual flight